This week I've been coming up with completely unique intros for this for quite a while now. Here is another one. Lackadaisical. Lackadaisical is something that a word that you... Should we start again? Lackadaisical is a word that you might refer to someone who is a bit lazy or a bit sort of lax, someone who doesn't really pull their weight. You might say, oh, that person has a lackadaisical attitude towards work, and they might be sort of walking around in a bit of a daydream. You might say, the Victorians, they built the industrial world, right? But they also had quite a lackadaisical attitude towards social welfare. Ooh, did you like that one? I liked that one. I enjoyed coming up with it. There is there's a reasonably long history of this word. When I say long history, I mean it goes back to Shakespeare, really. The original phrase was alack. Alack being an exclamation of shame or failure. So if the internet was around when Shakespeare was around, Failbook might have been called Alack-Book. Do you remember Failbook? Do you remember I Can Has Cheeseburger? Do you remember those innocent days of the internet before we were all at each other's throats on Facebook? There was a cat and it was saying I Can Has Cheeseburger because although cats have a rudimentary understanding of language, they don't have any understanding of proper grammar. And yet I did find it funny. I still find it kind of funny. Anyway, enter Shakespeare, that factory of phrases, who comes along and sticks it in his Romeo and Juliet play. Spoilers for Romeo and Juliet, in case you haven't seen it, by the way, or read it. I don't understand why you'd read it unless you're studying it, in which case, no. So Romeo, upon discovering that Juliet is dead, or he thinks she's dead, because spoilers, it turns out she's not dead. Hang on, I've got this. He says, she's dead, deceased, she's dead, alack the day. I.e., what a failed day I've had. I hope that in 400 years' time someone invents something called I Can Has Cheeseburger, and then also invents something called Alack-Book, and then we can all look at other people's unfortunate idiocy that everyone always does all the time, and we can laugh at them. We can laugh at other people's unfortunate brain farts. And then once we disappear into a cauldron of shame, we can all argue about it. Great! It's going to be great! Here's the thing though, I still find it amazing that 400 and something years ago, people were picking up phrases from the theatre in the same way that we pick up phrases from television. You know, when, I don't know, a certain character in a television programme, like Joey from Friends, for instance, who says, how you doing? That's don't please, that was an awful impression. Anyway, Lackaday enters common parlance. By the 18th century, this has become Lackadaisy, probably from the influence of Oops-a-daisy. For the American viewers, would you like that again? Oops-a-daisy. A lackadaisy was someone who displayed a languid attitude towards the day, probably from some kind of regret. In its modern sense, we just use it to sort of, it's a catch-all term for someone who's sort of lazy and careless, really. Now, you may have noticed that I've been saying lackadaisical instead of lackadaisical, which is probably the way that most of you say it. It's certainly the way I said it until I looked up the spelling of this, found I couldn't spell it, and then found that I could spell it when I took out the S or the X or whatever it is that I was trying to spell it with. That's because it is lackadaisical, it's not lackadaisical. It's probably because of the influence of the word lax, which is now used as a synonym for lackadaisical, or lackadaisical is a synonym for cinnamon. It's a synonym for lack. I guess you probably all know what lax means. It means to have a sort of carefree attitude to things, a bit like lackadaisical means. But the thing is that lax has a very specific etymology. Lax is an old Latin word. Laxus was its full form, and it specifically refers to relaxing one's bowels. It's where we get the word laxative. So there you go. From Shakespeare to you are very, very welcome. Goodbye.